Hello, Emily. Welcome back to Rendering Unconscious. I'm so excited to free associate with you.
Me too.
As I was saying before we start recording, I'm loving your class. You want to talk a little bit about that to start so people can know what you've been up to?
For sure. Yeah, you're a participant in the year-long class I've been teaching called Psychocosmos, which is kind of like a wild, I guess, semi-free associative exploration into the links between psychoanalysis, the occult, specifically astrology, and art. So we're looking at like all these different moments in astrology. We take like different planets or the house system or whatever, the zodiac, and link it up to different moments in psychoanalysis, specifically like Freud and Jung, but we've been exploring other things too. And a lot of like visuals and slides and artwork and conversation. And I think it's been kind of like trippy and cool so far.
Yeah, I like it. I think we talked about it on a previous podcast episode.
Oh yeah,
When
we
we were
did. We talked
mentioning
all
it,
about
I was
it.
like, I have to sign up for this. It's like, yeah, psychoanalysis and astrology and art, these are my favorite things.
Yeah,
Now we're doing
same.
it.
And you just did an awesome presentation for the class, which was very surreal and great. And I just think that, yeah, it's a lot of cool people. It's like a lot of artists and astrologers and psychoanalysts and just like curious people who are very kind of interested in talking to each other, which I think kind of makes the class. Like it's all about the people. And where am I going with this?
Have you done this
Nowhere.
kind of
Not
classes
to
before?
them. Um, oh, and yeah, I mean, I was like, it's kind of an experiment because it's like once a month for an entire year. So that like we're all kind of going through our weird temporal changes as the class unravels. So it's cool. And people can still sign up. You can sign up throughout the whole year and get the recordings.
Yeah, no, I think it's great and highly recommended. And it's great to do it once a month, especially when you're dealing with astrology, right? Because it just fits perfectly and people can really kind of pay attention to and live through like what it's like to go through each of the houses or each of the signs, you know? So I feel like it brings it more into like real life, like what it looks like on the ground.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's kind of like a follow-up to this class series I did a couple of years in a row called Void of Courses. And that one was always unrecorded, and people just came like once a month and we talked about the different astrology for that month. And it was very interesting. The way it was really interesting the way that things kind of unfolded over the course of the year. So this one's a little more like civilized in the fact that it's like recorded and like there's a Google Drive and there's readings, so it's a little less wild, but it still has that kind of timestamp energy.
Yeah, and you always know things are going well when synchronicities happen. And there's synchronicities happening with this course. Like I was just posting in the Discord this morning, I've been reading my book, Things Happen for as an audiobook and posting that on my Substack, but it's going to come out as a proper audiobook. And when I was reading it, we had been talking about Irma's injection, Freud's dream in class. And then when I was reading it this morning, there were little cut-ups of Irma's injection in there. So it was really fun to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I loved that moment, and I agree that it's a sign things are doing something or syncing up when there are those weird synchronicities. The class has been talking a lot about like spiders. Spiders is one that's been brought up a lot. And then like people have been having these weird spider experiences and like dropping them in the Discord. And Thomas Mann and Magic Mountain we've been talking about. And then like I was just randomly I like turned to this page in Liz Green's book on Neptune, and she's like quoting Thomas Mann at length and very yeah, so very kind of
I have two Liz Greens here because of you.
oh, honey, those are great. Those are
I
great
don't
ones.
have the one on Neptune though. Guess I need to get that.
Yeah, those are good though. I love her. She has a whole that one book you held up, Jung Studies in Astrology, is like the excavation on Jung's astrological studies and like a deep dive into his library and his writings. It was so good.
So good. I
She's
love
great. Yeah, her
her.
book on Neptune is interesting because she goes into actually a lot of the stuff we've been talking about in class. Like we started off the class talking about hysteria and Charcot and the sort of I don't know, hypnosis origins of psychoanalysis. And she equates Neptune to those states, those like trance states. So it's kind of interesting. It's like a psychoanalytic astrological take on Neptune.
I love it. That's the best. I'm gonna have to get that. And Neptune has just done something huge, hasn't it?
Neptune did something huge. Neptune entered a new sign, Aries, and that's major because Neptune's an outer planet and it stays in one sign for, a generation basically.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens now. I guess we are seeing what's happening.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's getting
we're
wild.
teaching a class together, so that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's gonna be so much fun. We should talk about that.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So we're gonna do deep dive or a jump into the artistic
Jump, a
influences
little
and
jump.
interests into for Freud, Jung, and Lacan.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll do a deep dive later.
Yeah, we're gonna see how this rolls out. Yeah, it's gonna be, well, we're kind of still shaping it, but we were talking about how Jung is often left out of these conversations about Freud and Lacan, and we thought it would be fun to put them all in conversation with each other and talk about their relationship to art, but also sort of like their own really strange and idiosyncratic ways of doing and writing about psychoanalysis and like encouraging people in the class and ourselves to think about psychoanalysis as an art and like not necessarily just like parrot what they're saying, but using their words and their systems and their tools as a gateway to maybe do something like that ourselves, like create our own version of psycho dot dot dot.
Exactly. And I think that's the best thing that people can do. Absolutely. Because they each did have an interesting relationship to art, and none of it was appreciated at the times. Like they all downplayed it. Like Freud, of course, wanted everything to be medical science and like kind of didn't deviate from that, tried to make everything, even though when it clearly wasn't, decided it had to be in these like medically scientific terms. And especially the people that translated him made that even worse. And Jung, of course, like hid his whole excavation into his unconscious and making the red book and didn't want anybody to see it. And it wasn't even released until pretty recently, actually, really was like hidden for a long time comparatively. And then Lacan, of course, he was like used Dali's writings in his own doctoral thesis just as an example, but then didn't cite him because he didn't think that his uh, higher ups would appreciate him, citing an artist in a medical thesis. So, yeah, and it's a shame because I feel like if they had been able to be more of themselves, more authentically, I mean, they of course each did a ton, but if they were even able to like do it more, that we would have all benefited from that even more. And it just makes me feel like we should all try to do that and not censor ourselves because of these fears of what the society or others will think about what we're doing. And of course, yeah, we don't much because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about psychoanalysis, art, and the occult.
Yeah, that's not one of our problems. What about you? Like how do you feel like studying those three and like their thoughts on art and their writings on art like impacts how you see clients and stuff? Or Annalise Ann's, sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like at this point, most of the people I see are pretty creative. It's like mostly like queer people, creative people, witchy people. Often these three things go together. And yeah, and I feel like sometimes people think like because I'm Lacanian, quote unquote, even though I don't really think of myself as Lacanian, but I guess more so than other things. Yeah, that I'll be like this is in the symbolic register and this is happening in the imaginary register, and like that's not how it works. And if it is working that way, then you should probably be like, this is shouldn't be working like this, because that's just like an intellectual exercise. It
You
should
mean like you have the sense that like people who come to you are expecting you to like kind of spew Lacanian
Well,
theory?
people have said that, or they try to do it. Like they're reading
Oh.
Lacan and they're trying to, yeah, like
Mhm.
talk that way. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Like it's great if you want to read it, and that's fine. And I also respect people who want to do their analysis and not read any psychoanalysis, which is also
Okay.
interesting because
Yeah.
really that's how Freud learned, that's how Jung learned, that's how Lacan learned. All the things they learned was really from like their own kind of self-analysis and their own work. And that's how all of us learn, really. It's like the readings can be interesting in like putting words to certain experiences. I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that at play in my life or things like that. But you shouldn't be like thinking of the theory when you're talking, like in your analysis. You should just be saying whatever comes to mind, as Freud said, like literally just like say whatever pops into your head, and then it's kind of in the après coup, like in the afterwards, you kind of start putting things together of like how things have unfolded in your life, or these kind of cycles that we go through, or these relationship patterns. So don't use jargon. Try not to do that. I try not to do it in my writing, but of course, I didn't even realize I had done this because scansion is such a like basic word in Lacanian psychoanalysis. But in my book on art and psychoanalysis, that I really didn't use jargon inside the book, but I put a jargon word in the title. Scansion and psychoanalysis and art. And then apparently that scares people because they don't know what scansion is, but it just means the cut, like just the cutting, the scanning of the session, the Lacan short session or variable length session.
So
Um,
like you lost me at scansion. No
yeah,
thanks.
exactly. People don't know what that is. But it just, yeah, it just means the cut. The subtitle's the cut and creation.
It's a good
It
word.
talks about different artists that use this kind of cutting, which is like where I feel like psychoanalysis is at now, which is very different than 100 years ago. It's like before Freud was trying to put interpretive meanings to people's experiences and try to see these patterns of like how the relationship with the mother or the father or whoever like affected your life, etc. But I feel like that happens too, of course, and object relations is like always going to be present, these kind of relationships. But there's also a lot of like undoing like these narratives that we've inherited from society about how we are and who we should be. It's often gender based and things like that. Like I feel like a lot of times it's like locating these kinds of narratives we've internalized and like just take as givens about ourselves and realizing like, wait, do I really believe that about myself or how do I really feel? And like taking those apart. So I feel like we're in like a time period of like cutting down these kinds of narratives so that we can move forward in a better, different way.
Mhm. Yeah, that tracks. I mean, that's also, I think, why I love, and I think you do too, like reading artists' accounts of their, whatever, like psychoanalysis or their studies in some way, or like their forays into these different fields, whether it's like studying them and or like being in analysis. Like we talked about this in class, in the psychocosmos class, but I love HD, the great poet HD's book about her time being analyzed by Freud, because she's sort of in a way giving insight into like his strange artistry and like the way that their time together was spent, but also her own, I guess, like, the natural ways that we or that she sort of self-censored on the couch. She's like describing in this book thoughts that she was having on Freud's couch that she decided not to say. Specifically fascinating for our purposes, she was thinking about astrology and like her child's astrological sign and different angles of the sun. And she said that her father and Freud, her father was a scientist, like both agree, like it's best not to speak of astrology. So I love that moment because it's like astrology becomes like what's kind of hidden or like the underside of her analysis.
Absolutely. And I was just at the Freud Museum in London a couple of weeks ago for the first time, which was such a nice pilgrimage. And they have an exhibit on like women, Freud's women or women in Freud. And she, of course, was one of them, that they had like a whole section about her, which was nice to see. And actually in the book, in the newest book, The Queerness of Psychoanalysis, I co-edited it with Elizabeth Punzi and Miriam Sawyer, and Elizabeth's piece is about HD. She's obsessed with HD. Um, she writes about her in all sorts of ways. And this piece she wrote about her and Breyer's relationship and how Breyer, which was like one of her main life partner, and how Breyer was actually looking into becoming a lay analyst, which I hadn't known. But Freud and Hans Sachs, HD saw Freud and Breyer saw Hans Sachs, and how they both were encouraging Breyer to pursue analysis as a lay analyst, but then the war got in the way. But that's really cool. And she was talking about specifically with queerness and like how they were polyamorous, and Breyer preferred to go as sir and he him, and how Freud had no problem with that and being like, become an analyst, because other psychoanalytic scholars that contributed the book have tried to become analysts and like have had institutes actively reject them, saying like, we don't have anyone here who's qualified to like analyze a trans person, which is like fucking insane. So yeah, and disgusting. So yeah, so it just shows like Freud had no problem. So like, catch up, people.
Yeah, Freud was kind of down for, and he was talk you know, he talked about like universal bisexuality really early, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. People really got conservative in a field that really wasn't and isn't. It should not be. But yeah, I guess institutions always love to do that.
Yeah, institutions, but also I think it's like this particular mindset maybe now, which isn't maybe necessarily that like Freudian, because I think like these like super like set identity labels in a way can hinder like these explorations or free associative freedoms. So I think there's like a bit of a bit of that mentality now, that can like masquerade as one thing, but is maybe another thing.
Totally.
Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I like the slipperiness of Freud too, like the different that really kind of comes out in his letters. Like he's interested in such wild, I mean, truly like bonkers moments in his letters to Jung, but also like Fleece, which we talked about in class, and like the kind of obsession that he would have with these men, I guess women too, but he had like these really intense
Romances.
romance. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of touching, and also a little bit you can see him like, yeah, like becoming obsessed and sort of really like grasping on to the ideas of these men and then kind of rejecting them. Like you can kind of see in his letters how he discards people and can be quite mean, like
Yeah,
all of us
exactly. They don't
sometimes.
live up to his ideal.
Yeah, no.
There's no way for them to.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, like and the young thing especially, I think that's really interesting. And you and I have talked about this before, but like I really never hear, it's so rare that I hear Jung brought up except in like a Freudy or Lacanian conversation, except to kind of quickly dismiss. So I think that's part of the reason we're teaching this class is to kind of like take everybody seriously and put them all in like equal convo.
Yeah, exactly, because it goes both ways. Like people in Jungian circles usually don't read Freud or Lacan, and then the academia, which is like Freudian Lacanian, they just like kind of make fun of Freud. I mean of Jung, and they do it to a lot of people too, which is interesting. Like also like Wilhelm Reich, and yeah, there's like several different people that
They
they
dug
kind of
on.
take on this narrative, like, oh, this person just went crazy at a point, oh, he was psychotic or whatever. And it's like, okay, if someone's, first of all, these are like really early psychoanalysts and they're developing this like really new ideas. And just because you don't agree with the direction someone went doesn't mean you should write them off as crazy. And like, what kind of psychoanalysts do that? You know, it's like, isn't our whole job supposed to be to like explore the human mind, to help people explore their minds and see where it goes and like uncover all these things that are repressed because they're judged in that exactly that way. So it's just
Mhm.
really like boggles my mind that psychoanalysts can be so judgy and like pathologizing to things that like all of this is part of human experience. And a lot of like in magical circles, which you know is becoming more and more mainstream. People love Wilhelm Reich and specifically his later work when he was talking about orgone and this kind of thing. Because
Cloudbuster.
yeah, there is a lot of like magical threads that talk about like, your libidinal energy or your orgasmic energy and how that like can be used in magical ways and can be very healing. So it's like, just because he went into a realm that you don't know anything about doesn't mean he's crazy. And same with Jung, like, okay, so he was like really delving into his unconscious, and also a lot of people I know in the magical world, see him as very much like a shamanic kind of figure, like somebody who like what they call had like a yeah, shaman sickness, they call it, where it's like they go through a period where it's almost like a psychosis, but it's because you're being called to, have this like greater purpose in your community or in your society. And it's an ordeal going through the unconscious and the spirit realms and things like that. And so yeah, they see him, a lot of people see him as that. So like, yeah,
Yeah,
I
you're
hope that we
right.
can help rectify this split because
It's our mission.
it's really
It's
bullshit.
called
Yeah.
shaman sickness. Is that what you called it? I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
Hmm.
I like that name. I like that name.
Yeah, I can
Um,
send you a good piece. I think it's in, oh, or maybe I just have it recorded. I'll see if I can find it. I don't know if they actually wrote it down or if I just had an event where I had these two different magical practitioners, Charlotte Rogers and Kai Armand, and they presented together on Morbid Anatomy, where they both had these kinds of periods of life that's come to be known as shaman sickness, where you like, yeah, have these kind of, what psychoanalysts or psychologists would call like psychotic breaks, but it's really just like breaking down like your ego's reality, which is usually like a very like normative worldview, and helping you like see a more kind of magical worldview, which yeah, can have like more animistic features or spirits or entities that you talk with or things like that, like Jung did. And they both talked to it as Charlotte's from New Zealand and Kai is from New York, but he's Black American. Yeah, and they talked about it from their different points of views. It's really interesting.
yeah, I mean, I think also, and I don't know, what do you think part of it is because people kind of maybe this is part of the like psychoanalysis as art or like considering it alongside art, but people expect artists to go crazy, you know, or they think they are, whatever, anyway. But then when like a psychoanalyst or a psychiatrist or whatever has this kind of episode or event in their life, it's like their work is discarded or disregarded in some circles. And I think that's kind of interesting, especially in light of like what how Jung viewed art, which was partly or the role of the artist, which he talks about as kind of being like a vessel or a mouthpiece for the psychic secrets of his time. And therefore, like the artist isn't necessarily like this very conscious individual. He could be almost like a sleepwalker or in a trance. It's not like he has to be this shaman all the time, or even should be. He's more of a mouthpiece for some other thing. So maybe I don't know, maybe that person in that state wouldn't make a good psychoanalyst or astrologer or whatever, but maybe they would. Like I don't know, you know.
Yeah, and especially maybe once they've worked through it,
Yeah,
get the
right,
other side.
right.
And now there's a lot more movements like with mad studies and stuff of like more peer-oriented like support, because people that have been through these kinds of things know what it's like. But even like Steen Van Hule just wrote a book about madness and talked about his own personal experience, which is really interesting. because he's a very like regarded Lacanian psychoanalyst. So I think that was really that reminds me I really need to write him and have him on the podcast because it's really yeah, remarkable for him to do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and like the alchemists and Jung wrote so much about alchemy, and you and I have talked about this as well in here, but they thought of like madness or at least this kind of primordial chaos like psychically as the beginning of the alchemical work and actually like necessary for any kind of transformation to happen, like this touching on a moment or a time of total darkness or detachment or um confusion at the very least.
Yeah, and in a psychoanalytic process, if you're doing the work, there's always a period where I call it traversing the void, where you're like, you break down the ego's like defenses in such a way because they built up over time, or these like habits that you have uh built up over time based on like usually the family environment that you grew up in, and then when you get older and you're creating a different environment for yourself, often people are enacting the same kind of patterns or relationship patterns that their parents had or they had with their parents, and this isn't serving, or the way that you reacted to what you were seeing in your household, and usually it's not serving them anymore. People don't, unless you grew up with a super happy perfect family, which I've never met anyone who has. um, then like there's usually some things you want to undo and not repeat. And when you go through that process of like, you have to break down those habits and patterns, and then you're in this like, I recently started calling it like this chrysalis stage because I went to the zoo in London, and we went through like the butterfly garden, and it's so amazing to see all these little butterflies. And then they had like a place that was all of them and their moths in their chrysalises. And it was called the puparium. And I was like, oh, I love that. I was like, we just went through the puparium. It's like when you're in that stage where you've like dissolved all of these like habits and things, and then you're in like a place where you haven't been before, and it is scary and it is unsettling, and you're like, okay, I want to move forward in a way that's better for me or more aligned with who I feel I am. But like, to do that you have to get rid of like old habits and comforts that, while they might not be doing you any good, they're also very familiar and are serving some sort of function, like you've developed that way for a reason. So to break that down and like and change things, there is like a really scary time that people get really kind of disoriented or don't feel like they have good footing or grounding. And so yeah, you have to go through that and then yeah, come out the other side.
Yeah, the chrysalis stage for sure. And I, of course, sometimes you don't come out the other side. But often you do, I guess. And also it's not necessarily like one thing, like one event or just one process or like a linear process. It's sort of like ongoing or repetitive, or you get caught in one place for a long time. And like Jung was really interesting when he spoke about this stuff because there are certain like symbols that might show up that can be clues, symbols or images as to like what state you're in, or that might kind of mirror your inner status in some way.
Totally. Yes, I think it would be great to bring these three into conversation. And of course, yeah, then I also thought of Otto Rank because was like super immersed in Otto Rank last year. And I love his ideas about artists and art's place in society. So we can sprinkle some Rank in and some Louise Salome and yeah, whatever we feel like. We love to
Yeah, I love
manifest, see what happens.
yeah, we'll see what happens. I love Lou Andrea Salome. I love her writing on psychoanalysis and also on like artists and Nietzsche. She was like a really interesting beholder and reader of people and of Freud. Like I love how she writes about Freud. There's something really satisfying about like reading what people wrote about him, especially when they're like, especially the way that women talked about him. Yeah, it'll be interesting. And also Lacan, maybe we'll talk a little about Lacan's like diagrams.
If you want to.
I mean, sometimes I think
They
so.
are kind of some sort of weird art, though. I never thought of them that way
Yeah.
before you mentioned that.
Yeah, we talked. I guess we must have touched on it. And maybe it was this past Psychocosmos, but we were talking about I like the astrological charts, which really freak people out when they see them. Like time and time again, when I'm in session with people, they're like, "Oh my God, like what is this?" And really, it's you don't even have to know. Like it's just like sitting with it as this visual thing, almost like Jung's mandalas or something. Like I feel like you can just sit with it and reflect on it and like ask about weird little symbols and see what unfolds over time. But I think people get like that, and I've gotten like that with I've had that reaction to Lacan's like crazy knot diagrams or what, I'm like, what? Like, I just like, turn the page, like, what are you talking about? But actually, it's really, they're kind of surreal. I think both astrological charts and diagrams and Lacan's work, and maybe Jung's wild red book drawings too. I think they would maybe form an interesting conversation, just like looking at them or seeing them as like, maybe not necessarily for something, but just like almost regarding them as a painting to begin with.
Yeah, we should
Probably at
definitely
like very
take a look at his
heretical.
drawings. They're always so evocative.
I think, yeah, they're interesting. I think they're, and in some ways, like, I don't, maybe this is because we've been talking about Louise Bourgeois a lot in class, but they remind me a little of some of her stuff because she has like some knots and weird interlocking moments in her work.
Totally.
I know she didn't like Lacan though.
No. Oh, tell me more. I love, spill the tea, please.
Gossip hour. Yeah, she said I think she called him like a fake and a joke. She loved Freud and she didn't like Jung either. Um but because she wrote so much about psychoanalysis and I have these like these writings of hers. I think it's just called Return of the Repressed, and it's just like her notebooks and sketches
Ooh, I
that
have to get
document in
that.
part like her analysis, and like she'll just have these takes on people that are often quite biting and funny.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we have talked about that. I love that stuff. I love letters and things that weren't meant to be seen.
Mhm.
It's so much
Yeah.
more fun to read for me at this point than reading people's essays. No
Yeah.
articles.
Depends on my state, but yeah, I do like the letters. And Jung and Freud's letters were brought up in class whenever the class was, like Sunday. I don't know. Time is moving very strangely lately. I'm like, where am I? I feel like March lasted like 6 months.
March was intense.
It was intense. Yeah, it wasn't just me, right? Like you had a long March. Like,
It was intense for sure.
it's
I
like
mean, this whole
now I'm
year
feeling
is
like
long, to be honest.
yeah. Yeah, I was like it's still like
We've only, yeah, like what, 10 weeks into this freaking presidency. That doesn't help.
yeah. Yeah, I guess since the beginning of the year, it's been a weird 2025. And March astrologically was the most kind of active and uh tumultuous of
Yeah,
the
it
year.
absolutely was. I did a reading for the year, a tarot reading for the year for our Patreon, and it was the 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 cards. The best card of the year was for March, sadly. So it was like the best.
Yeah. It's only gonna get worse.
And then the overall was a three of swords. I was like, great.
The heartbreak card. Interesting. So that's 2025 is Three of Swords.
Yeah.
I love the way that card looks though.
Yeah, it is a good card artistically, but
It's
so we'll
iconic,
see.
but yeah, it's quite gloomy. Swords is the cool suite because it's like the maddest. It's like the madness suite.
Yeah, it's still a bit stressful.
Ethereal night, a lot of nightmares, a lot of like, are these really swords or are they like drawings of swords or wallpaper? Are these swords gonna kill me or am I gonna use them for some other purpose? I think so. Yeah, it's my favorite suite, but it's kind of scary.
Maybe I could think about them as cutting, like the cut ups. That could be good. That could help me in my
It's definitely the
relationship to the
scansion
swords
suite.
change. Yeah. I like
Yeah,
that. Thank you for that interpretation.
sure. Anytime. Yeah, a lot of like blindfolds too in the swords, or people sleeping or like waking up in the middle of the night. The mo maybe the most psychoanalytic journey in the tarot.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. I'm gonna repair my relationship to swords.
Maybe we'll talk about swords in
Through
class.
that,
Who
through
knows?
scansion. You might have to cut. It might hurt for a second, but it'll be better after that, or it'll be different. Anyway,
Yeah, something post-surgery, the post-op. Um, and when you turn the three of swords upside down, it's like the swords fall out of the heart. That's how I think of it.
that's good. That's hopeful.
And
I
then you're
get
just left
that.
with like just emptiness, just the lack.
I can live with lack. I've gotten very accustomed to that. So,
Well, isn't that like that's good? Isn't that like the whole point? Like trying to live with lack.
yeah, it really helps when you just are like, this is just how it is.
Ordinary unhappiness.
Yeah, it really is a thing. It really works. It
Yeah.
helps, definitely takes the edge off.
Yeah.
I think so. But I've also had three analyses, and I'm doing my own analysis like constantly in my head and analyzing my husband. Which I
Do you
constantly apologize for. I'm like, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, I like it. I'm like, okay, good. Because
you like
I can't
accidentally?
help it.
What do you like? What kinds of stuff do you notice, or can you not say?
So much stuff.
And you'll just like say it out loud, like at dinner or something.
Yeah, I'll just be like, I'll catch him like when he's doing something. I'll be like, see, when you do this, it's because of this, whatever. I'm like definitely like a Freudian interpreter, not like my normal self with like everyone else. Usually I'm just like letting people talk through things, but I also hear him talk all the time, constantly. But then like I'll stop him and I'll be like, see, when you're doing this with this is like your mom, and this is like your dad, or this is like when you mention this thing. And if you would just do this, that would help like break this little circuit that you're in, because he's definitely obsessional, like you know.
And he likes it. He doesn't mind.
Yeah, apparently, which is good
Oh.
because if someone was doing that to me, I would go crazy. I'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah, same. I'd be like, can you please shut the fuck up?
Yeah.
So that's cool. He sounds nice.
Yeah, he's really nice. He really
What's
is.
the sign?
He's a Capricorn.
I mean, not to astro profile, but I tend to enjoy Capricorn.
Yeah, he's a Capricorn with a Virgo rising and a Sagittarius moon. So the Sagittarius moon gives him a little bit of adventure. Otherwise, I don't know what it would be like. Capricorn with a Virgo rising, you just be like, details, 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 small and large,
No, Virgo's
patterns, patterns,
crazy
patterns.
too.
I love my ruts. I love my routines. So yeah, we're very different. I'm Cancer with a Leo rising and a Capricorn moon. So the Capricorn moon helps balance me out,
Mm.
and the Sagittarius moon helps give him a little adventure.
That was like one of Carl Jung's like I don't even know what you'd call it, like case studies or something. He did this study on like long-term couples and what their astrology was, and he found that if when one person has this like if what you just described, like one person's sun sign is the other person's moon sign, that's like the most lasting
Oh, good.
in his research. Yeah. So there you go. You're good.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, because we don't really argue like at all. It's just like, yeah, we have different enough perspectives. I'm like, I see what you're saying. He sees what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. And we've both been analyzed, which I think also helps. He was in a 5 day a week analysis for almost 5 years,
Whoa.
like super
Well,
Freudian.
and he still is.
Yeah. Now he's an ongoing analysis
Now it's
for the
7 day
rest
a
of his
week. Yeah.
life. So that also helps when people are
He
like
was like training for you. Like
aware. Yeah. Seriously. Yeah, I don't think, yeah. yeah, people have to be self-reflective. It's really hard to be around people that are not self-reflective, I find.
What are the signs of someone who's not self-reflective?
Or just people that are projecting all the time and enacting and yeah, like blaming others. Yeah, where they don't like have insight into themselves, you know. It's just really like externalizers, you know, people that externalize everything and they think everything is like everyone else is doing around them. They don't like see their role in things. I'm much more comfortable around like depressed people who because depressed people are usually like very like insight oriented and looking at themselves and blaming themselves. I don't like people that blame others all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it's a different vibe. Yeah, like the melancholics are blaming themselves or at least like don't have like that the same kind of energy to blame others.
Yeah. And
You're there
artists are
too.
working through something. People do work through a lot through their art. It doesn't mean they're crazy, but it is a way to work through your unconscious conflicts. Whereas that's why I prefer art that's more automatic and not like art school art where it's like make sure you're trying to say something with your art or whatever, because I feel like it should be the same as analysis where you understand your art and what you're making through the act of making it, not like pre-conceptualizing something ahead of time and then executing it. That's not my kind of art.
Hmm. How do you get like an idea, or does it just come to you and then you enact it, or does it like kind of come slowly?
When I make art, I don't
Mhm.
really think much at all. I usually just I have like boxes and boxes of images and text, and I usually just like fit things together based on probably like colors and aesthetic forms. And then I kind of look and see what it is afterwards. I don't really read the text or look at the images too consciously. I'm sure my bigger mind sees everything, but my very narrow conscious awareness is not so aware of what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's kind of for me like part of it. And then there's like if in the case of like a novel, there's like the editing, which is like a totally different mindset kind of, I guess.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing. Yeah, we also last time we talked, I think Vivian had just come out and I think I hadn't read it yet. And now I've read it and I love it. What a great book.
Yeah, I'm really glad. Thank you.
It was
Yeah,
really
you
fun to go to sleep with.
what'd you say?
It was fun to read like before bed, like to go to sleep with. Like what's
Oh
happening in
yeah,
the
it's definitely a night
world
novel.
now? It's great for dreams.
Great for dreams. Cool. Yeah, there's some dreams in there. It's a really dreamy, weird book. The paperback's coming out in June, which I'm excited about because I like how paperbacks feel.
Nice. How did you come up with the idea for this?
Mm, like a lot of my stuff is kind of like I find it in another work. Like I found Vivian in a book of poetry that I had written or that I was writing. And it was like this moment, this like Hans Belmer moment. And I was like, wait a minute. And this like world started to happen. And I was like, I guess this will be a novel.
That's great. I love that. I've been having fun with like since my novel Things Happen was created like using a lot of cut-ups, but then of course at the end I had to like read it and make sure it kind of like made sense when you're reading the whole thing. You can't just like read cut up text or else I mean you could, but it wouldn't be very pleasant, I don't think. I had to make it legible. And also like if I introduce people, I'm like, okay, I have to introduce them here and not like that at the end so people know who these people are, etc. Things like that. Move things around consciously to like make it legible. But then I've been like, as I've been recording the audiobook, for example, I send the recordings to this guy Pete, who's been making a lot of music out of my spoken word cut-ups. And yeah, he just sent me a new album. It's all cut-ups from the book. And it's really fun to like, yeah, hear the words of the book like in music and things like that. Or if I'm like listening to the album and doing like cleaning or something and like hearing different things, or like hearing the Irma's injection and like figuring like, oh, that's from this and this is from this. It's really interesting to see these things like in different forms.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good. I mean, that's kind of like the way to actually get to know something, I guess, now that I think of it, because one of my most memorable reading experiences from this year was, or from I guess last year, was Cormac McCarthy's like new novels,
Mhm.
like the two final ones before he died, and I read them, and then I also decided to listen to them as audiobooks, and it was like I was like, why don't I do this with, I mean, I don't do that with everything because I don't have like exorbitant amounts of time, but ideally I think that's how I would read everything. It was like a totally different thing. It was like it felt like a different novel, but also like two experiences like layered over each other that like somehow made something else. I don't know, it was very cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure you catch a lot of things you didn't catch like the first time around because you're having a different sensory experience. Yeah, I really like those books, and the one with the like psych patient was particularly
Delamere.
interesting.
So good. That was an amazing one to listen to audio because it was
Yeah,
like
I
they
have to
had the
get
two
that as an
voices.
audiobook. Right. Yeah.
It
Mm.
was just like one long session.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I'm
Mhm.
gonna have to get the audiobook. Thank you for that. And see what that's like. Um, yeah, I love that. That's very cool. I was gonna say something else, but I forgot. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I guess I should also mention before we wrap up that I'm also doing a class after our class. Our class is on the 10th, right?
May 10th. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we should mention.
Yeah, May 10th. Come hang out with us.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's like affordable. It'll be chill. 3 hours, a break in the middle, so you can like drink and eat and do whatever you gotta do.
Perfect. And that'll be super fun. And I'm doing it from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern time. So, yeah, so all the time zones, a lot of time zones can fit into that, which is great.
Yeah, and
Um,
like no prior knowledge of anything required. Just show up. It'll be what a pure encounter, to use your phrase.
yeah, I like that. And yeah, I think that's important because I also had like when we did our most recent psychoanalysis art and the occult conference in Copenhagen, there's like some people that said, "Oh, I really want to come, but I don't know enough about psychoanalysis," and I'm like, "Oh, but you don't have to. It's like if you're interested in, yeah, magic or art or any of these areas, it's like just come because, yeah, we're not hierarchical, patriarchal, like you have to know things and be smart and like prove your smartness for us." It's much more about the learning experience and like hearing what different people have to say and different perspectives. And I feel like that's so much more, I get so much more out of that. And that's really what psychoanalysis is all about. It's about people sharing their perspective and worldview. It's not about like how many texts from Lacan seminars you've memorized.
Yeah. You do have to prove your smartness to me because I'm a Virgo. But no, just kidding. But yeah, yeah, totally. It's just gonna be we'll just talk. And also I think just to generate, even if you're someone who's looking for like a way into an art project or into psychoanalysis or just like a kind of you're formulating your own perspective on this stuff. I think I'm hoping it'll be like interesting fodder for that.
Yeah, exactly. And an artist, like, yeah, inspiring. Maybe you can find a new angle on what you're working on, like you do with your astro readings for artists. And I should also mention a couple weeks after that, on May 25th, I'm doing a class of Morbid Anatomy. It's 4 Sundays for 2 hours a class, starting May 25th on my book, Scansion to Psychoanalysis and Art, which you got a little taste of in your class.
Very
Um,
good.
it
Very good
talks
book.
about all the different artists that I like from Freud's time to contemporary time. And yeah, artists that use the cut up. And then I use their work to kind of explain little tidbits of psychoanalytic theory to help people, yeah, help them make them more palatable. If you can see how people are working with them in real time through their artwork, then it makes them more comprehensible, I feel like, than, yeah, when people in the ivory tower just spew masturbatory jargon at each other. I really am not into academia. So,
Yeah, it can
yeah.
get pretty masturbatory. Um, all the yeah, kind of like a kind of dry. There can be like kind of dry, impotent feeling.
Kind of. I think that's the only feeling.
That's a vibe, yeah, running through it. So hopefully, I don't think our class will have that vibe, but who knows? I guess one never knows.
Our class, I don't think it's possible for our class to have a dry, impotent feeling. No,
Try.
definitely not. But that's why I love Morbid Anatomy and I love everything that's happened with like online classes over the past 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's just like people can learn what they're interested in their own time and space. And yeah, it's just so much more conducive to learning. You don't have to sign up for this like super long program to be able to access information. You can talk to other like-minded people or people with different perspectives, and yeah, it's more fun and engaging.
Yeah.
I like when people are independent researchers or like to study, yeah, different threads and bring them together like you're doing. It's like interesting when you follow your own interests and there's very different interests, the way they intersect or can complement one another. That's the way to
Yeah.
go.
And I think to your point about like kind of understanding different ways of thinking or concepts through like actively interacting with them in your own work or something. I think this is exactly what I try to do with astrological sessions, like working with the planets in real time in your own work and like not worrying so much about like this is the archetypal meaning and this is what it's an aspect with. I mean, we can talk about that too, but I think just using the planets as kind of jumping off points can be really, really interesting and generative.
Fine. We'll have to see what's happening astrologically on May 10th.
Oh yeah, I can do the chart for that day. We did the chart. What did we do the chart
For
for?
the birth of psychoanalysis.
For the birth of psychoanalysis for Freud's equinox letter.
I love that. I had never heard that. That's so cool.
Virgo.
It makes sense.
Makes sense. It's tracking.
It makes
Feels
sense.
very heretical to like astrologize Freud, so I like it.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's like, yeah, hystericizing the obsessive. It needs to happen. It really does. It's good for
Yeah, like in
him.
your
He
household.
loves it secretly.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like your husband.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah, they love it. That's like the subtitle for our class. Like, you love it.
Yes, and where do they find the class? On your website, Emmalea Russo.
Yeah, we'll link it because it's like a backslash something that I forget right now, but we'll link
Okay.
it
I will link it in
somewhere.
the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and come to Psychocosmos and come to our class and come to my class on avant-garde art and psychoanalysis at Morbid Anatomy, and we will keep you busy this spring. It was so great to talk to you as always.
You too, Vanessa. Thank
And
you.
yeah, I'll see you in a couple of weeks for your next class.
See you very soon.
Bye.
Bye.